Ms. Ritu, Menon, Sumangala Damodran, Mark Aranha, Indira Varma ji, Mr. Keki Daruwala, distinguished guests, friends, students. On behalf of the trustees of the Sarvodaya International Trust, the Delhi chapter, it is my privilege to welcome you this evening, to this evening of collective remembrance and reflection, and it is titled Protests of Peace. How do we remember the apostle of nonviolence who fell to an assassin's bullet in January 1948, 70 years later? So much has happened to our nation and the world since that fateful day. We often invoke the spirit of ahimsa, satya, asteya, asangraha, samnyasa, and so many such ideas that Gandhiji himself drew from the Gita to weave the theory and practice of what he called the relentless pursuit of truth, or satyagraha. Joan Bondurant had referred to it as the conquest of violence, this unique philosophy of action that Gandhiji had bequeathed to the world, and many of his apostles like Martin Luther King and the Dalai Lama sought to emulate in different contexts. I don't know if you're aware, this is not perhaps the platform to share this with you, but in some senses it is, that every year during the Tibetan New Year at Losar, there is a prayer that is sent out to enable the Chinese to lift the veil of ignorance from their eyes so that they can be more compassionate towards minorities. So it's that kind of a separation between the so-called oppressor and the act of oppression that Gandhiji tried to bring a sensibility to. Today, we choose to remember him as one whose call to action reflected an alternative perspective on politics and an alternative perspective on development. Alternatives to one that our world perilously has embarked upon, the results of which are palpable today. Gandhiji's was a perspective that transcended our reductivist and conventional binaries, the binaries of the private versus the public, of the insider and the outsider, of legality versus justice, of law-abidingness versus transgression, of victim versus oppressor, the masculine versus the feminine, and above all, of participation versus protest. In fact, Gandhiji changed the meanings of what it meant to be revolutionary in the early 20th century and beyond. In fact, his was a struggle, as we all know, on all fronts against hegemony, the monocultures of the mind, the arrogance of certitudes, and the tendencies to homogenize, colonize, suppress, imprison, and conquer, materially, militarily, culturally, socially, or even ideologically. It stood up against the crudest constructions of non-reflexive jingoism and the cultures of militarism of all hues. As he himself said, he did not want his house to be walled in on all sides and his windows to be stuffed. He wanted the culture of all lands to blow about his house as freely as possible. And he said, and I quote, "Mine is not the religion of the prison house, but it is proof against insolent pride of race, religion, and color." He could well have added gender. So here he was. Here in him we saw an explicit acknowledgement of the need to celebrate diversity. On occasions such as this, what is often less acknowledged Gandhiji's perspectives and ideas of the power of women, or should I say the feminine principle, in the manner in which he contoured his alternative politics. The paradox of what we read about today in the Tao of leadership. What is soft is strong, because what is flexible and ever-flowing can wear down, like water, the hardest of rock. That, in some senses, is the paradox of leadership. It's ever-flowing and it can wear down the hardest of rock. Gandhiji's views on women are complex and from some feminist perspectives problematic and indeed controversial, especially around issues of female sexuality. But this much is clear. He was committed to absolute equality between the sexes in many senses. He described women as morally superior to men and as the best possible foot soldiers of his own non-violent army. He sought their liberation from domestic drudgery and sexual subordination and slavery, and was indeed the first to encourage, rather exhort them to participate and engage in the public sphere and the political arena. And it was owing primarily to him that Indian women participated in the national movement in large numbers. And interestingly, as Millie Graham Pollock, an intimate friend of Gandhiji, wrote, he too tried to internalize as many qualities of womanliness into his own persona as he possibly could. Qualities of faith, fortitude, care, devotion, patience, tenderness, and great empathy. I don't mean to essentialize womanhood, but it was really a statement against muscular politics, not masculinist politics for him. And as you know, the famous book by Manu Ben, which was titled Bapu, My Mother. It's an interesting book. I think if you can get hold of it, it would be worth reading. He wrote extensively on the issue of what today we might call euphemistically women's empowerment in young India. And he spoke in the late 1920s and early 1930s extensively on this. In fact, in a talk to women ashramites in 1926, he said, and I quote, "A man should remain man and yet should become woman. Similarly, a woman should remain woman and yet become man. This means that man should cultivate the gentleness and discrimination of women, and women should cast off her timidity and become brave and courageous." And he brought women's artifacts and items that belonged largely in the private sphere as powerful symbols around which he wove the ideas of freedom, resilience, courage, and independence. And you all know salt and khadi. He flipped the conventional symbols of valor and masculinity and feminized them. In many ways, women who have waged peace over the centuries have done precisely this. They have created new metaphors of engagement, a new idiom that speaks evocatively against war and the cultures of militarism and muscular politics, foregrounding their own distinctive language and ideologies and creativity and vibrant modes of expression against entrenched cultures of impunity and cultures of silence. And we all know that from the time of Aristophanes' heroine Lysistrata had announced a sexual strike in 411 BC to bring the men of Athens and Sparta to end their war, women have employed novel ways of protest and resistance, underscoring the power of nonviolence. Women at the Greenham Commons, for example, protesting against, in a missile site, pinning the diapers of little children on the fence. The Wajir group in Kenya, where the women processioned in the nude to raise issues of disappearance of combatants and non-combatants to the state. The mothers of disappeared children, disappeared people in Argentina, in Sri Lanka, even in India. and the women in black in Jerusalem. They are legion, but very often they are invisibilized in the meta-narratives of war, nation building, and security. Closer home, during Gandhiji's lifetime and after, from Kasturba onwards to Aruna Asaf Ali, Miraben, Sushila Nair, the women of the Chipko movement much later, the protester at the Balyapal missile site, Koel Karo, Kudankulam, through the Bhopal gas Pidit Mahila Andolan, to the Narmada agitation, and the Imams of the Mirabaibis in Manipur at the Kangla fort, to Iram Sharmila and onwards, women have cast aside the conventional image of women working for peace as the woman in white, with a Florence Nightingale lantern, passively holy or wholly passive. Peace with justice has been their clarion call, and like Gandhiji, who asserted not just the right, but the duty to stand up and fight injustice and seek not just retributive, but restorative justice. This is the way that women have waged peace. So what is called waging conflict non-violently, women have turned to new pathways of action and protest. And who better to speak to this than our guest of honor, Ritu Menon, whose talk today is aptly titled, When Women Wage Peace. But before I formally introduce the speaker, our honor's guest of honor, and also the performers for this evening, I would like to extend a special welcome to Professor Sumangala Damodran and her colleague and co-star, Mark Aranha, who will be singing resistance for us this evening, following Ritu's talk. Professor Damodran will contextualize each piece, introduce its relevance to nonviolent action, our own history of the anti-colonial struggle, and the voices that stand up against oppression and discrimination the world over. And now for the formal introductions. I will not read their biodatas because it will go into several pages. But Ritu Menon is a feminist publisher and writer. She's probably one of the first publishers of a feminist journal, with more than a dozen books and scores of academic essays to her credit. She's the author of the groundbreaking 1998 book, Borders and Boundaries, Women in India's Partition. In fact, it is a book that shook a lot of us out of our complacency, made us look at our own history very, very differently from the vainglorious kind of narrative that is often passed on. And this made an impact on partition historiography. And she also co-edited No Women's Land, Women from Pakistan, India and Bangladesh, Right on the Partition. All her work on India's partition proceeds from a feminist perspective. She has co-authored several multi-volume studies, especially on the status of Muslim women in India. She has been active in the national, regional, and international women's movements for over 30 years, collaborating closely on research projects, alternative media initiative with women's groups across South Asia. We're all grateful to her because she gave us a new language to understand the realities of gender, violence, and the partitions. A completely new language and a new perspective. She was awarded the Padmashree by the Government of India in 2011. A very, very warm welcome, and we are honored to have you in our midst. I'd also take this opportunity to introduce Sumangala. Sumangala is a professor of economics and development studies and popular music studies at Ambedkar University. She's also a performer and has been involved with research and teaching in popular music studies. She has established, she has links with the contemporary representatives of the People's Theatre movement, which really swept the revolutionary discourse in 1940 and 50 in our country It was the traditions of IPTA is something that she works on, and she has an album titled Songs of Protest. She has also collaborated with poets and musicians from South Africa, and it's apt that she should have had this connection with South Africa, especially today, because we all know Gandhiji's own connection with South Africa. And she's currently engaged in a project which looks at music and migration, and also looking at the symbol and the substance of lyrics on freedom, articulation, and creativity. A very, very warm welcome to you and to your co-star, Mark Aranha, who's a versatile Delhi-based guitarist and composer who plays an eclectic range of styles. He was formerly a marketing professional, and his passion for music led him to Swarnabhumi Academy of Music, where he studied under several great jazz musicians. Mark has over 15 years of playing experience, although he hardly looks more than 16 himself. And this includes the electric guitar, the steel and nylon string acoustic guitar. His acclaimed projects for which he has co-written and arranged music are Ditty and Mark and the Underknowns. I don't think he's underknown at all. A very warm welcome to you. And may I now request Indira ji and Keki to felicitate our guests this evening. Thank you.
I've got a glass. Should I? It's sloping. Okay. It'll fall. It's okay. Don't worry. Yeah, it's fine. Thank you very much, Meenakshi, Indira ji, Keki, one of my oldest friends, and everyone here, of course, but all the trustees of the Sarvodaya International Trust. I'm hugely honored to be here. It's very, very moving to be present at something that celebrates possibly the greatest resistor, human being, model that we have had in this country, that we've had the great fortune of having had in this country. And it is particularly moving for me to be here today because we are passing through a time of extraordinary violence on a daily basis, where practically every value that the Mahatma held is being violated and celebrated. by, of course, those who have no time for what he believed in, what he laid his life down for. I'm certainly not going to be able to contribute in any very major way to that, but I thought it is very appropriate for us to try and revive that now, to somehow insist that what he believed in and what he stood for are essential for us to recover if there is to be any kind of harmony or peace or equality or dignity or humanity or compassion, indeed, in our lives, both personal and political. So I'd like to thank the Trust for inviting me to speak. I'm very humble in this endeavor. I have never done a keynote in my life, so please indulge me. And I hope that I will be able to speak a little bit about what it means when women try to wage peace. I'm going to begin with a poem by a woman poet from the Northeast, whose name is Mamang Dai. It's only part of a poem, but I'll read out the latter part. From the east, the warrior returns with the blood of peonies. I am the child who died at the edge of the world, the distance between end and hope, the star diagram that fell from the sky, the summer that makes men weep. I am the woman lost in translation who survives with happiness to carry on. I am the breath that opens the mouth of the canyon, the sunlight on the tips of trees, there where the narrow gorge hastens the wind. I am the place where memory escapes the myth of time. I am the sleep in the mind of the mountain. Mamang Dai is an Arunachali poet living in a region that has experienced protracted violence for a very, very long time, like much of Northeast India. Manipur, Nagaland, Arunachal, Meghalaya, Assam have been under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act for an almost continuous period since the mid-1990s. Armed violence, the fact of it, the apprehension of it, and the experience of it is an almost everyday reality in many parts of the Northeast, as it is in several other parts of our country. How do people, men and women without resources and the means to overcome this everyday violence, resist? How do they deal with the far superior and brutal power of those who wield their weapons against them? What possible recourse is available to them? A similar predicament and equally urgent questions would have presented themselves to Gandhiji when he was confronted by the firepower and apparently invincible strength of the imperial power in India. It was his particular genius, but also his principled rejection of violence as a means of resistance, as a strategy, and as a justification that he brought to bear the moral and ethical power of nonviolence on his struggle, and to face the bullets of the British with the only weapon he was willing to use, his unarmed body. Since then, but especially in the recent past, there has been an almost exponential increase in the scale and kinds of violence, social, political, communal, caste, and gender, across the country. For the most part, ordinary men and women find themselves caught in the crossfire between competing violences, a numbing cycle of reprisal and retaliation, of provocation and repression. In India, as in much of South Asia, these cycles of violence are both sporadic and protracted. Sporadic in some cases, protracted in others, so that we are never in a post-conflict period. There is no real cessation of violence, and peace remains elusive. If, following the Mahatma, we have a principled objection to the use of violence in all its forms, as a means not only of domination and control, but as a strategy for resolving conflict. If, like him, we believe that far from being passive, non-violence is an active form of resistance, and what is more, is not for the faint-hearted. If we eschew violent resistance, even in the face of brutal oppression, then by what means and in what manner do we confront these multiple violences? Although there is a great deal one can say about the current violence, I would like to focus on how women who have been resisting violence for a very long time now have done so not only non-violently, but publicly, and have presented what is, in my view, the most sustained form of non-violent resistance against violence in situations of armed conflict. I focus on armed conflict because it was, of course, the armed power of the British that Gandhiji first needed to address. On July 11, 2004, at 3:30 p.m., Havaldar Suresh Kumar in Imphal, in Manipur, signed a memo stating that he was arresting Thangjam Manorama Devi, 32 years old, quote, a suspected insurgent, explosives expert, and hardcore member, unquote, of the banned People's Liberation Army. 3 hours later, she was found dead, having been raped and shot in her vagina. Nearly 6 kilometers from where Manorama's body was found lay Iram Sharmila, who had been on an indefinite fast, refusing to eat a morsel since November 2000, in protest against the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in force in Manipur since 1980. On July 15th, 4 days after Manorama was killed, the entire country was stunned to see photographs in the national press of a most extraordinary protest by women. 15 middle-aged women demonstrated naked in front of the gates of Kangla Fort, which was the headquarters of the 17 Assam Rifles, in Imphal, shouting, "Indian Army, rape us." 75-year-old Thokchom Ramani, secretary of the Women's Social Reformation and Development Samaj, said, "Our anger made us shed our inhibitions that day. If necessary, we will die, commit self-immolation to serve our innocent sons and daughters." For over 3 months, the state of Manipur was in turmoil with frequent strikes, bandhs, protests, and demonstrations demanding that the AFSPA be revoked. Reacting to a spate of custodial and encounter killings, people's anger and resentment flared across the strait at the central government's perceived indifference to their demand for punishing the guilty and revoking the act by Independence Day 2004. Strikes and work stoppages were widespread as protesters took to the streets. Activists of the women's group, the Mera Paibis, or the Torchbearers, marched in a candlelight procession through Imphal, and Apunba Loop, an umbrella group of 32 civil and human rights organizations, called for civil disobedience, recalling Gandhi against the AFSPA. Manorama's house became a virtual shrine, uniting activists and ordinary people against the act. There is a kind of cliché that says men make war and women make peace. Women are generally supposed to be nurturing and caring, naturally maternal, even Gandhi believed that, and therefore predisposed towards peace, just as men are supposed to be the opposite. Women are more open to mediation, to negotiation and compromise, because it has been suggested they are obliged to carry on the business of survival and sustenance when all social and economic supports have broken down. And they are often obliged to do so in the absence of their menfolk. So they are more likely to be found caring for the sick or wounded, in relief and rehabilitation, and in rebuilding communities, than carrying guns and going into combat. Because they are also among the worst sufferers in any situation of conflict, armed or otherwise, they are believed to be more inclined towards peace. Feminist analysis has tried to move away from biological, essentialist, and culturalist arguments in favor of women's tolerance and nonviolence, and suggested instead that if women have a distinctive angle in peace, it is not due to their being nurturing, but more to do, perhaps, with knowing oppression. Their historical exclusion from structures of power, both in the private and public domains, as well as their experience of subjugation, gives them a stake in working for peace and justice, or a just peace, as well as in keeping democracy alive. For it is only through social justice and democracy that they will be able to realize their right to equality. According to this logic, a feminist culture of peace fundamentally criticizes unequal structures of domination and is built on learning to live with difference, without aggression. In other words, non-violently. I would like to suggest an additional factor that may be at work in women's peace activism, and this is their particular gendered experience of violence in war, but also in supposed peace. As recent empirical work the world over has shown, for women, the weapons of war are much the same as the weapons of peace. Those who wield them in the battlefield or on the front often return home and turn the violence inwards. Women have first-hand knowledge of the connected forms of domestic, communal, and political violence that stretches from the home to the street and into the battlefield. In earlier work, I have spoken of this with regard to the partition violence in India in 1947. Similarly, studies of post-Yugoslavia, Bosnia, Israel-Palestine, Ireland, and closer home, Kashmir, Jaffna, Karachi, Dhaka, the northeast of India, demonstrate the links between militarization, misogyny, and domestic violence. By the way, we can see this misogyny at work in all the protests around Padmavati and the Karni Sena, but that's a slightly different issue, although not very. It is the combined experience of oppression and violence, plus the responsibility for survival and sustenance during and in the aftermath of conflict that I believe provides the strongest impetus to women's peacemaking. In Kashmir, Parveena Ahangar's search for her missing son eventually led to the formation of the Association of the Parents of Disappeared Persons and to a cry for collective justice. The refusal of the women of Kunan Poshpora to remain silent about their rape by the Indian security forces led to the highlighting of military atrocities. The public cursing of the Mothers' Front in Sri Lanka forced the government into acknowledging its role in the disappearance of thousands of young JVPers in Sri Lanka. The women in black, the Madres of the Plaza de Mayo, the Jaffna Mothers' Front, take their private sorrow and make it public, thus not only radicalizing the personal, but radicalizing even motherhood, shaming the institutional and the authoritarian. Women's construction of the legitimacy or illegitimacy of conflict is a critical factor in women turning their backs on it. In Kashmir, for instance, a turning point in the armed struggle came when Kashmiri women began to shut the door on militants. But is there such a thing as women's practice of peace? Do we do peace differently from other peace activists? And if so, are these alternative practices effective in the long run? Can they, for instance, work across borders, national as well as regional? As with economic activity in South Asia, in peace work too, women belong in the informal sector. The informal spaces of politics, which by its very nature affects our practice. The ritualized cursing of the Mothers' Front or the sustained protest by the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo, indeed the public mobilization of motherhood in the cause of peace and as a direct challenge to the state, are quintessentially womanist forms of peace activism. Bearing witness, as happens in the World Courts on Violence Against Women and in various tribunals on violence or other crimes, is not womanist in the same way, but it has radicalized the hitherto marginal and powerless, and forced public and institutional notice outside the traditional arenas of such activity, which is the court, the police station, the executive, or the bureaucracy. Radicalizing the protest and moving it outside these traditional arenas is a particular contribution of women's peace activism. Dialogue and networking have been among the most effective strategies used by the global women's movement in working for social change, as well as in raising awareness. Dialogue that bridges difference and is predicated on respecting that difference is at the other end of the spectrum from what another analyst of conflict, Ranabir Samadar, calls maximalist friendship. Such a friendship, he says, like Cold War friendship, depends on maximum enmity and then maximum hostility. far from being conducive to peace, it kills understanding. The alternative to this is accommodating difference, which, more than solidarity, requires a politics of understanding. And it is this politics of understanding that I believe women in the region, that is the South Asian region, are trying to forge. Cynthia Coburn, a British peace activist, describing a few notable examples of cross-border peace initiatives by women in Ireland, Israel, and Bosnia-Herzegovina, identifies 6 characteristics that she believes made the difference between women's efforts and others. They are: 1, affirming difference; 2, non-closure of identity; 3, reducing polarization by emphasizing other differences; 4, an acknowledgement of injustice; 5, defining the agenda; and 6, group process. Again, these may not be essentially womanist ways of doing peace, but they have been worked at successfully by the 3 groups she studied, and they are clearly different from conventional confidence-building measures, 2-track, and other people-to-people dialogues. Coburn also draws attention to the importance of recognizing what she calls the space between us in peace work, that social and political space in which we separately live and work in order to craft a politics of understanding. It is not easy to do. In Sri Lanka, for example, the Jaffna Mothers Front and the Sinhala Mothers Front were unable to cross the ethnic divide. Nor in the Northeast could the Naga Mothers Association make common cause with the Watsu Mongdung in the Northeast. Occasionally, women's groups may come together on specific issue, as groups did in Bangladesh with the Hill Women's Federation, but they parted company on issues of national identity. One unexpected instance of successful bridge building, however, was that of the MQM in Karachi and the Women's Action Forum. But the crucial point is that women's fledgling attempts at making peace have highlighted the necessity of transparency and democratic process in any peace accord or negotiation that will endure. The inclusion of marginal and hitherto unheard voices in this process, painstaking and protracted though it may be, may actually have a better chance of succeeding than that peace reached through force or subjugation. We can see that most poignantly in northern Sri Lanka today. The range of protests that women have used in situations of armed conflict and violence have varied in form and content, from conventional demonstrations and rallies to vows of silence, hunger strikes, and the more extreme fasts unto death, like Irom Sharmila's. Unconventionally, women have also protested and marked their resistance in more individual and symbolic ways by, for example, refusing to change out of the clothes they were wearing when abducted in the aftermath of the partition of India, or wearing their hair loose during the entire period of mourning for their slain husbands and menfolk in the wake of Mrs. Gandhi's assassination in 1984. Veena Das quotes the widows of Sultanpuri as saying, and I quote, "They have asked us to clean up our houses and to go in and settle down. How can we settle down here? Do you see the heaps of ashes? Do you see the blood? Here, put your hand inside this heap, and you will see the melted skulls. They would not even let us have the dead bodies. We begged them. You have killed our men. Let us have their bodies at least. Let us mourn them properly. Unquote. Not only did the women make their mourning public, they defiantly hung on to their filth and their pollution. They would not go into their houses. They would not light the hearth, and they would not change their clothes. In other words, they refused to return to normalcy, to resume their daily lives. In more collective forms of resistance and in protest against the disappearance of their sons, mothers in Sri Lanka and in Kashmir have asserted motherhood in order to shame the authorities into recognizing their status as wronged mothers, demanding information on their children's whereabouts. Elizabeth Helene, who has worked on the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo and especially on the extreme violence in the southern cone of Latin America, has said of those protests, and I quote, "Mothers, relatives, grandmothers, and widows erupted in the public arena as the bearers of social memory and of human rights violations." In the very first novel that Nayanthara Sehgal wrote, called A Time to Be Happy, the mother of a young revolutionary assured of certain death says, and I quote, "The Mahatma, when he preached nonviolence, understood many things, but the greatest of these was his understanding of a mother's heart," unquote. But the July 15th protest by 15 Meitei women was a radically and profoundly different kind of challenge to the state, and in sharp and shocking contrast to Irom Sharmila's fast against the AFSPA. Sharmila's protest, like other fasts unto death, offers up her own body in the cause of justice. The Meitei women, on the other hand, publicly presented their naked bodies as a rebuke. "Indian Army, rape us," they shouted, challenging the authorities by drawing graphic attention to the shameful violation of women's bodies by them. By saying, "We are Manorama's mothers," they as good as declared that her rape was tantamount to raping them, and by extension, all Manipuri women and all mothers. As sacrilege, the rape of the mother is the most unpardonable violation, yet the 15 women exposed their naked bodies as the ultimate in self-abnegation and in symbolic recognition of the threat of rape as the power of all men over all women. At another level, however, their protest redefined the hitherto unbridgeable distance between the armed forces and the citizenry by forcing the attention of both upon themselves. The all-women's group, the Mera Paibis, has been one of the most important social organizations in Manipur to resist a wide range of social ills. It was formed initially to mobilize women against alcoholism and rowdyism among Manipuri men. But it has since extended to activities to take in other social issues, especially the increasing militarization of the state. Among the things, the Mera Paibis have consistently opposed the AFSPA, They have demonstrated, fasted, held protest meetings, and systematically brought abuses by the armed forces to public notice. They have taken up rape cases and volunteered legal help. They have even mediated with the army on occasion and organized public meetings with them, and they have intervened between civil society and underground groups. Soldiers in Sarong, a film made on the Mera Paibis, powerfully communicates the steady resolve of the women in the face of recurrent brutality. These are ordinary women, by no means radical or even subversive, yet they remain undeterred in their demand for the withdrawal of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act from Manipur, which is still in force. The abiding image from the film is of the torch-bearing Mera Paibis, the human and female face of a militarized state on one side, and of the military in full display of their masculinity on the other. Men dominate the institutional aspects and structures of conflict. Women, children, and feminized men are its dominated other. Repression itself, as Helene has eloquently elaborated, is gendered, carried out by masculine and patriarchal institutions, the armed forces and the police. Rituals of power in the public sphere, she says, and I quote, unambiguously stage the opposition between the active, empowered masculine subject and the passive, excluded, feminized audience. Audience, not just women. An audience that may at times involve the entire civilian population. Personalized symbols of pain and suffering tend to be embodied in women, while repressive mechanisms appear to belong to men. The teenage face of Zahira Sheikh, her pigtails framing it on either side, has almost become synonymous with the Gujarat massacres of 2002, just as the predominant images from Kashmir, whether of militants or the armed forces, are those of violent, armed confrontation. Counterposed against the fear-inducing and power regalia of the armed forces, the uniforms, the weaponry, the parades and patrols, all of which we saw yesterday, are the feminine objects of resistance used by women: candles, flowers, scarves, and diapers, and photographs. Mamang Dai's poem, with which I began, written at the height of conflict in the Northeast, is not only a repudiation of violence, whether by insurgents or by the armed forces, it is a refusal to succumb or to give up hope, and at the same time, it is an affirmation of the power of nonviolent resistance. I am the woman, she says, who survives with happiness to carry on. I am the breath that opens the mouth of the canyon. Thank you.
एक कुर्सी यहाँ पानी के लिए यहाँ पीछे ऐसा जब हमको ग्लास It's a great privilege for me and Mark to perform here, and I'm thankful to Indira ji and Dr. Meenakshi Gopinath, a very, very old friend, and the Sarvodaya International Trust for inviting us to perform for an occasion which, as Ritu said a while ago, has become a very, very important occasion, particularly in the kind of context that the country is going through today. For me, it's a great honor to be here, and I'm not sure whether I deserve this honor. I hope I'll be able to do justice to the occasion. We are going to be singing resistance. We are going to be performing some songs which come from India's history of the anti-colonial struggle and also after India gained independence. We'll start with a song that was written after the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. We don't know exactly when it was written. It was written by an anonymous poet, but it was first publicly sung by a singer of the Indian People's Theatre Association, Preeti Sarkar. She was a singer in the central squad of the IPTA, which was located in Bombay, and which had a whole range of eminent artists, musicians, dancers, photographers, painters, who came together in the year 1943 to form this organization called the Indian People's Theatre Association, which was to use culture as a mode of articulating resistance. The song was composed by an anonymous poet, as I said, and used to be sung by Preeti Sarkar, who at the time was considered one of India's best singers. And this was something that was said by none other than Pandit Ravi Shankar, who was a member of the IPTA Central Squad at that time. दिन खून के हमारे प्यारे न भूल जाना, खुशियों में अपने हम पर आंसू बहा के जाना, दिन खून के हमारे। सैयाद ने हमारे चुन चुन के फूल तोड़े, वीरान इस चमन में अब गुल खिला के जाना, दिन खून के हमारे। गोलियां जलियान बाग में हम सूनी पड़ी कब्र पर दिया जला के जाना, दिन खून के हमारे। कुछ जेल में पड़े हैं, कुछ कब्र में गड़े हैं, दो बूंद आंसू पर प्यारे बहा के जाना, दिन खून के हमारे। हिंदू और मुस्लिमों की होती है आज होली, बहते हैं एक रंग में, दामन भिगो के जाना, दिन खून के हमारे। प्यारे न भूल जाना, खुशियों में अपने हम पर आंसू बहा के जाना, दिन खून के हमारे। This is another song from the early 1940s. It's a heer which was written by Sheila Bhatia about the Bengal famine. When the famine was ravaging many parts of eastern and some parts of northern India as well, there was a big rally that was held, a peasants' rally that was held in Lahore to not only raise awareness about what was happening to people in Bengal, but also to generate solidarity among the peasants of Punjab towards their brothers and sisters in Bengal. It was also a period when the British were cleverly playing politics between the governments of Punjab and the governments of Bengal in a way in which it became impossible for grain to move from Punjab to Bengal. So while we would still know that there were several songs that were written in Bangla at the time of the Bengal famine, which came often from the poets who were witnessing the famine firsthand, this is a song that was written far away in Lahore. It was sung at this big gathering, which reportedly had about 80,000 people attending it, and was sung at the time by a young artist, singer, Swatantrata, who taught me this song a few years ago before she passed away. This is a heer about the Bengal famine. किनु भोल दसा दुख दर्द सइयों, किनु भोल दसा दुख दर्द सइयों, मेरा रोग ताला इलाज दिसे कर काट साईं कनू छुटे मैं थो क्यों सवाल है बिना जवाब दिसे खेड़ा नाड कोई पास दिसे वसदा जग जापे बियावान अड़ियो जिस तका मैं मन दी पड़ास दिसे किनु फूल दसा दुख दर्द सईयों मेरा रोग ताला इलाज दिसे कर काट साईं कनू छुटे मैं थो क्यों सवाल है बिना जवाब दिसे The next song was written by Makhdoom Mohiuddin at the time of the Second World War. It was called जाने वाले सिपाही से पूछो वो कहाँ जा रहा है. And this song was written by Makhdoom as he was traveling back home in a rickshaw from the railway station in Hyderabad, where he lived, after attending a conference elsewhere in the country. And as he passed in the rickshaw, he saw a whole procession of emaciated, extremely impoverished people who had been conscripted for the army and who were being taken to fight someone else's war. This was written and composed by Makhdoom. It used to be performed in the 40s and in the 50s as well, when Makhdoom himself would sing it. And it was also used in a film in a slightly modified form called Usne Kaha Tha. It was set to music by Salil Chaudhary. But then it went out of public memory. I happen to have had the good fortune of being one of the people who revived the song in 1984 And this is soon after Mrs. Gandhi's assassination, when a carnage broke out in many parts of India against the Sikh community. And this song was revived in Khalsa College. This is when I was an undergraduate student in Delhi University. And there was a big peace march which was organized by a citizens collective. There would be many people here who might remember. And this march went through different colleges of Delhi University, collecting relief for people who were in the camps, but also appealing for peace and calm. And it ended in Khalsa College, where a large number of people from the Sikh community had gathered, because that was one of the few places which was safe, particularly for the men who were being particularly targeted. And the atmosphere was extremely tense, and there were a large number of young Sikh men who actually also, in desperation, wanted revenge. And we had just learnt this song, and it was taught to me and the group that I used to perform with by Safdar Hashmi, who himself became a target of horrible violence a few years later. And at that point, when the atmosphere was extremely tense in Khalsa College, Safdar whispered in my ear and said, "Sing that song." And I was a young, obstinate student, and I turned around and I said, "But this is a song about the Second World War. What relevance does it have here?" He said, "Sing, I'll explain to you later." And so this song, we sang the song, and it was magical. It was magical because it actually completely changed the atmosphere. It was cathartic. There were the people who were in a rage, whose faces were contorted with anger, actually went down on their knees and cried. For me, this was a very, very important moment in my life, and also told me what singing resistance can be. So we'll sing Jaane Wale Sipahi Se Poocho. जाने वाले सिपाही से पूछो वो कहाँ जा रहा है। जाने वाले सिपाही से पूछो वो कहाँ जा रहा है। बच्चों को बहला रही है। लाश जलने की बू आ रही है। जिंदगी है कि चिल्ला रही है। जाने वाले सिपाही से पूछो वो कहाँ जा रहा है। कैसे सहमे हुए हैं नजारे, कैसे डर डर के जलते हैं तारे। सुर्ख है आंचलों के किनारे। पूछो वो कहाँ जा रहा है। जाने वाले सिपाही से पूछो वो कहाँ जा रहा है। जाने वाले सिपाही से पूछो वो कहाँ जा रहा है। The next song is a more upbeat one. This was written. Okay. Right. Yeah, we're going to end with this song. It's called Dola. This is a song that was written by Bhupen Hazarika, and he was talking about the condition of the palanquin bearers, the dola bearers, and what happens to them and how they talk about their lives as they carry people on their shoulders in palanquins. Hey dola, 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 hey ऊंची नीची टेढ़ी मेढ़ी सड़कों पे लिए दौड़े जाते हैं राजा का डोला। हे डोला, हे डोला, हे डोला, हे अपने जिस्म के खून पसीने के बल पे चलत ही डोला। हे डोला, हे डोला, हे डोला, हे ऊंची ही नीची सड़कों पे लिए हम जाते हैं राजा का डोला। ई डोला अपने जिस्म के खून पसीने के बल पे चलत ई डोला। हे डोला, हे डोला, हे डोला, हे ऊंची नीची टेढ़ी मेढ़ी सड़कों पे लिए दौड़े जाते हैं राजा का डोला। हे डोला, हे अपने जिस्म के खून पसीने के बल पे चलत ई डोला। हे डोला, हे हैया ना हैया ना हैया ना हैया, हे हैया ना हैया ना हैया ना हैया। हे डोला, हे डोला, हे डोला, हे डोला। हे रेशमी लिबासों में सज के वो बैठे हैं डोले के भीतर आज, और जगमग जगमग करते हैं सर पे सोने चांदी का ताज। हे रेशमी लिबासों में सज के वो बैठे हैं डोले के भीतर आज, और जगमग जगमग करते हैं सर पे सोने चांदी का ताज। हाय मोर बिटुआ के नंगे बदन को ढकने को नहीं कचोला। हाय मोर बिटुआ के नंगे बदन को ढकने को नहीं कचोला। अखियों में पानी आए फिर भी चलत जाए, मनवा को बांधे डोला, हे डोला, हे डोला, हे डोला, हे ऊंची नीची टेढ़ी मेढ़ी सड़कों पे लिए दौड़े जाते हैं राजा का डोला, हे डोला, हे हैया ना हैया ना हैया ना हैया, हे हैया ना हैया ना हैया ना हैया, हे डोला, हे डोला, हे डोला, हे डोला, हे जुग जुग से डोला कांधे पे चलत है, कमर टूट टूट जाए हो जाए, हे जुग जुग से डोला कांधे पे चलत है, कमर टूट टूट जाए हो जाए, हे राजा बाबू सोवत है निंदिया के गोद में, अपना पसीना बहा जाए हो जाए, हे ऊंचे ऊंचे पहाड़ों पे चलत जात है, कदम से कदम मिलाए, हे ऊंचे ऊंचे पहाड़ों पे चलत जात है, कदम से कदम मिलाए, अगर फिसल के गिरी है ये जानू तो फिर ना उठिए डोला, राजा महाराजा का डोला, बड़े बड़े लोगन का डोला, हे डोला, हे डोला, हे डोला, हे ऊंची नीची टेढ़ी मेढ़ी सड़कों पे लिए दौड़े जाते हैं राजा का डोला, हे डोला, हे अपने जिस्म के खून पसीने के बल पे चलत ही डोला, हे डोला, हे हैया ना हैया ना हैया ना हैया, हे हैया ना हैया ना हैया ना हैया, हे डोला, 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 हे डोला. Although we said this is our last song, I'd actually like to end with something slightly different, and we'll just take a few minutes. I want to sing a few lines from a song, the poem for which has been written by a dear friend, Ari Sitas, who's a South African poet, sociologist, dramatist, and civic activist. And the reason why I want to read this poem and also sing a little bit of its translation into Urdu, which was done by a young teacher in an Adivasi school in Madhya Pradesh, is because the poet himself has been involved in the anti-apartheid movement and has also worked on the idea of the ethic of reconciliation. He's written a book called The Ethic of Reconciliation and looked quite extensively at Gandhiji's ideas on nonviolence as a philosophy of praxis. And also in the context of the process of reconciliation that was initiated in South Africa after the transition, where those who had been oppressed had the generosity to let the oppressor into their hearts. And in tribute to that idea, and in tribute to the internationalism of Gandhiji's philosophy of non-violence, I'd like to sing a small part of this song. It started from a butterfly spinning. Once, twice. The poem is called The Insurrection of the Flowers. It started from a butterfly spinning. Once, twice, dropping dead. I cannot remember lightning or thunder. All I remember is the lull. Water stood still. The drop from the leaky tap stood still. The tears from my eyes stood still before the flowers burst the ramparts in what they called the insurgency of the flowers. They were everywhere, leaping from vases, snapping free from bunches, and there, flocks of jasmine, murders of hyacinth, parading up and down the emptying streets. The rumor spread to the trees and they bloomed. Roses conspired with almond blossoms. The Dangabane flower resurrected. The Kurinji blues intoned. एक तितली करे परवाज और मादूम हो जाए, कोई बुलबुल रगी आवाज से महरूम हो जाए। शहादत यूं भी होती है। न कोई अब्र गरजा था, न कोई बरक चमकी थी, मुझे बस याद है खामोशियों के बाद खामोशी। हवा ठहरी, हवाओं में ज़मीं के बाग़बा ठहरे, मेरी आँखों से निकले आंसुओं में आसमां ठहरे। गुलों ने जब गुलामी की सलीबें तोड़ कर फेंकी, बगावत यूं भी होती है। गुलों ने शाख छोड़े, गुलशनों के दश्त में आए, अमीने रंगो बूने खूब बहा कर कहर बरपाए। कोई कीमत मरासिम की, न कोई कदर जानों की, शहर में हर तरफ लूटी गई असमत मकानों की। कहीं नरगिस, कहीं मरियम, कहीं सुम्बुल, कहीं सूसन, बगावत यूं भी होती है। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
The honored guests, may I request our chairman or chairperson, Mrs. Indira ji, to recite a very well-known ghazal, which, it was a part of the Indo-Pak serial, Partition Ek Safar, and it was sung to the music of Vanraj Bhatia by Shreya Ghoshal and Udit Narayan.
That's right. Thank
Please.
you. I wrote this poem, first and foremost, Ritu, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Very, very wonderful talk. I cried once before, and I cried again today. Thank you, Sumangala, Mark, Meenakshi, everybody from the Trust. I wrote this poem for a project called Partition Ek Safar. It was a collaboration between Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. And I think this whole evening, this is what we've been talking. And हम लोग जो पार्टीशन के पकड़े गए थे, जो बच्चे थे जब हम लोग, तो बचपन में तख्तियों पे उर्दू सीखा, यहाँ आके उर्दू भूल गए। 8वीं क्लास में जाके हिंदी पढ़ने लगे, तो हिंदी भी नहीं आई, उर्दू भी छूट गया, हिंदी भी नहीं आई। कुछ हम लोग मिक्स्ड अप लोग हैं, तो अपनी पोइट्री से जिस तरह कोशिश कर सकते हैं अपने माने आप तक पहुंचाते हैं. I dedicate this to Ritu, to Sumangala, Meenakshi. कभी मुड़ के फिर उसी राह पर. This is a remorse between 2 or 3 countries and not people. कभी मुड़ के फिर उसी राह पर, न तो आए तुम, न तो आए हम. कभी फासलों को समेट कर, न तो आए तुम, न तो आए हम. जो तुम्हें है अपनी अना पसंद, तो हमें भी शर्त का पास है. ये जिद्दों के सिलसिले तोड़कर, ना तो आए तुम, ना तो आए हम. उन्हीं चाहतों में बंधे हुए, अभी तुम भी हो, अभी हम भी हैं. उन्हीं चाहतों में बंधे हुए, अभी हम भी हैं, अभी तुम भी हो. है कशिश दिलों में बहुत, मगर न तो आए तुम, न तो आए हम. शबे वस्ल भी शबे हिज्र है, शबे हिज्र तो है मुस्तकिल. यही सोचने में हुई सहर, ना तो आए तुम, ना तो आए हम. वो झरोखे पर्दों में बंद हैं, वो तमाम गलियां उदास हैं. कभी ख्वाब में सरे रह गुजर, ना तो आए तुम, ना तो आए हम. उसी शहर की उसी मोड़ पर थे हमारे घर भी करीब तर. उसी शहर में उसी मोड़ पर थे हमारे घर भी करीब तर. यूं ही घूमते रहे हम उम्र भर, न तो आए तुम, न तो आए हम. कभी इत्तेफाक से मिल गए किसी शहर की किसी मोड़ पर. अगर इत्तेफाक से मिल गए किसी शहर की किसी मोड़ पर, तो ये कह उठेगी नजर नजर, क्यों ना आए तुम, क्यों ना आए हम.
My pleasant duty to thank firstly the audience and the tremendous lecture, as also the musical rendition from, firstly, the lecture from Mrs. Ritu Menon and the musical rendition from Sumangala Damodran. I'll take just a minute to recall. I mean, it was a straight talk from Ritu Menon, and one could have expected nothing less. Anyone who knows her and the distinguished career that she, and the way she has fought for, for a cause all her life. But just to sum up, I do feel the attack, if I may say so, on the Armed Forces Special Act, which is playing havoc in the Northeast. Then the incident about Kashmiri women shutting the door on militants and that having an effect in the valley. The motherhood mobilization against the state. Then the cross-border peace initiatives. I was totally ignorant of all that. And and of course, the statement that the peace in Sri Lanka, peace through war and subjugation, means really, really nothing. So thank you for a splendid talk, Ritu. And you've all heard Sumangala Damodran with all those terrific, and especially the one about the "Kahan ja rahe ho, Sipahi."
Beautiful.
कहाँ
जाने वाले सिपाही.
कहाँ जाने वाले सिपाही से पूछो कहाँ जा रहा है. 2 years back we held I was involved in that. We held an entire evening on the Indian soldiers also in the in the Great War, the First War, and at a salary of 11 rupees a month. May I thank, firstly, Ms. Indira Varma, the President, who has been the heart and soul of all our activities, the Springdale School and their
We miss Jyoti today very
splendid,
much.
and Dr. Jyoti Bose, who is not here with us, but they are the real backbone of the Sarvodaya International, the Delhi chapter, and all the trustees, and of course the India International Center, which has always been what shall I say, the force behind us. Thank you, and the audience on a cold, wintry day to have come all the way. Thank you very much.